Welcome to Introduction to Educational Research and the video on epistemology. The philosophical field of ontology is concerned with what is true, what is existence, what actually exists, and how does it exist. In contrast, the field of epistemology is not so much concerned with what actually exists, but how do we go about determining or finding out what actually exists? It's referred to as a theory of knowledge. How do we acquire knowledge? How do we know what we know is actually knowable? Another way of saying this might be, what is our evidence threshold? What type of evidence does it take to convince us that something is true or real? Now, I don't mean to get weird here and go off on some philosophical trip down Alice's rabbit hole, but it is an interesting question. How do you know what actually is real? What is reality? Especially in today's climate of fake news and sham investigations and such. So this video is intended to help us examine three things. One, just what is our theory of knowledge? Two, what assumptions do we make about how we know things? And three, what is our evidence threshold? What level of evidence do we need to believe something is true or real? So put your seatbelt on, because here we go down the proverbial rabbit hole. First of all, we're all teachers or prospective teachers, and presumably we have some ideas about what teaching is and what constitutes effective teaching. So I'd like us to self-assess just what are those things we actually know about teaching, those things that are true or real. Now, I don't mean things like all children can learn, or every child has a right to a good education, or my district is not willing to pay teachers a fair wage, or things like that. These are parts of a belief system, and although they may be true, I'm interested in us assessing what we know are the actual hard facts about how we teach. What are the actual facts we know about how students learn? What are the actual facts we know about teaching strategies we employ in our classrooms, and things like that? We're interested in just the facts here. So in a minute, I'd like you to put the video on pause and get a piece of paper and create two columns like the ones you see on your screen. In the left-hand column, I'd like you to note those things that you absolutely know are the actual facts about teaching and your teaching. In the right-hand column, I'd like you to indicate how you know each of these things you listed in the left-hand column is fact, is true, or is real. In other words, what is your evidence that each of these statements are real? I want you to hold on to your list because you'll need it to complete the assignment at the end of the video. Okay, so if the task is clear, please put the video on pause and complete the task. And when you are done, please turn the video back on and we'll continue. Okay. Now, you've written down those things that you know about your teaching to be fact or reality or real. And you've also put down the reasons why you know that, your evidence. Well, now we're going to take a look at some traditional ways that people generally know stuff. And you can see at the bottom of your screen, there's tradition. That's one way we know things. Authority, relying on authority. That's another way. Logic, non-consensus reality, faith, and common sense, our senses. So let's examine each of these. Let's take a look at tradition as a way of knowing. Now, obviously, tradition is an excellent way of knowing things. an excellent way of knowing things, because tradition means that things have been going on for a long time, and obviously they've been working out because they've lasted a long time. But there is the story of the monkeys. There are 3 monkeys in a cage, and there's a bench in the cage, and there's a stick, and there's a banana hanging down from the ceiling. So one day, one of the monkeys gets the bright idea to pull the bench under the banana, get the stick, get up on the bench, and try and knock the banana down with the stick. Well, the researchers outside of the cage, who were behind mirrors, they spray the cage with cold water and they soak all of the monkeys. So all of the monkeys are running around screaming and hollering and all of that. The next day, the same monkey gets the same idea. He's going to do it again. So he puts the bench in and he does the same thing. And the researchers spray the cage again. And the monkeys are running all around and all that. And so what the monkeys learn after 3 or 4 days of this is that if anyone goes to get that banana, they're going to attack that person and stop them because they're going to get soaked. So one of the monkeys dies, and the researchers put a new monkey in. And so first day, the new monkey's looking around and this and that. He sees the bench, he sees the stick, he sees the banana. Of course, he gets the bench, puts it under the banana, gets the stick and goes to get the banana, and the other 2 monkeys jump on him and just beat him up. Just beat him up. The next day, this new monkey tries the same thing again, and he gets beat up again. So obviously, the new monkey learns you don't do that. So one of the original 2 monkeys, because only 2 original ones left, dies, and they put a new monkey in. And now this new monkey, he sees the banana and the bench and the thing, and he does the same thing, and the 2 monkeys beat him up. So eventually he learns that you don't go and do that. So finally, the last of the original monkeys dies, and they put a new monkey in, and he goes through the same process, and he learns that you don't do that. So now you have 3 monkeys that have never experienced the initial event of getting soaked with water, who are now carrying on this tradition of preventing anyone from trying to get trying to get the banana. So in this case, tradition really doesn't work. In this case, tradition is a detriment. And another thing about tradition is sometimes tradition can become an old solution when you have new problems. So as our society and our species evolves, new problems present themselves. So sometimes tradition is a good way of knowing things. Other times tradition is not a very good way of knowing. Let's take a look at authority. Well, the thing about authority, which is excellent, I mean, your doctor is an authority, your mechanic is an authority, your lawyer, we rely on these people. The problem with authorities is generally you can get authorities to state one thing, and then you probably can find a group of authorities who will state the opposite thing. So we have now climate control scientists, and then we have climate warming scientists, and we have climate denier scientists. So authorities are excellent forms of information and knowledge, but sometimes they can present a lot of problems. Now, logic is another way of knowing things. And here's an example of logic. Penguins are black and white. This is a syllogism. Penguins are black and white. That's the first premise, and that's true. Some old TV shows are black and white. That's the second premise, and that premise is true also. Therefore, some penguins are old TV shows. And then, of course, on the bottom it says logic, another thing that penguins are no good at. Well, the problem with logic as a way of knowing things, I mean, here we have 2 correct premises, but the conclusion is wrong. In that syllogism, the conclusion is wrong. The other thing about logic is it's not observable behavior based. It's language based. And so a lot of times we can get into confusing situations using logic as a way of knowing things. Although there are times that logic is an excellent way of knowing things. Non-consensus reality, things like ESP, touchstones, lodestones, astrology, non-consensus ways of interpreting reality can be very popular, but the problem is we are never able to really verify as to how valid these conclusions are. So we don't know anything about ESP. Other than there are some studies that say people might have it, and there are some studies that say they don't. There doesn't seem to be any real double-blind studies that point that out. But there are people who are into non-consensus reality and as a belief system. Faith is another way of knowing things. We can have faith in many different things. The problem is, let's just talk about religion for a minute. Which faith of all of the religions in the world is the valid one? Well, each one claims that it is the valid one, but yet there are so many. So faith, many people rely on faith as a way of knowing things. But it's more a belief system than an actual way of knowing. Finally, we come to common sense. And we're going to take an in-depth look at common sense. So let's dive down that rabbit hole. I want you to consider the image on your screen. We have a square superimposed on a series of concentric circles. Or is it a square? If you look carefully at the vertical sides of the square, or the top and bottom of the square, it appears that the sides seem to bend in a little bit. They seem to bend in the middle a little bit. See where the arrows are indicating. So the obvious question here is, what is the reality here? Is this a square or is it not a square? By the way, if you don't trust me, you can put the video on pause and get a straight edge and check it out and measure the sides or the top. This is an interesting visual demonstration, a visual that demonstrates how the context surrounding information can change that information into something it is not. So the context is the concentric circles. The square is laid on top of the context of the concentric circles. And that context changes how the square appears. So we're not sure what the reality is here. Here's another example. Now, obviously, these lines are not parallel. Or the question becomes, are they? They sure don't look parallel, but then again, they do now. So what's the reality here? This is another example of how the context that data is presented in shapes and possibly distorts our understanding of what is and what is not reality. Here's another example. These lines certainly look like they bend, yet they're pretty parallel. Again, an example of the context of information which will distort how we view reality. Oh, what's going on here? Both of these stars are exactly the same color blue. Again, the concept that the data is enmeshed in changes our perceptions. The bottom star on the right-hand side is covered by white bars, and so it seems lighter. The top star on the left-hand side is covered with black bars, and it seems darker. Both of the stars are exactly the same. Both are exactly the same. Again, the importance of context that information is presented in. Oh, here's a great example. This is a quintessential example of context, how context shapes our perceptions and judgments. On the left side of the screen, we have 5 large circles surrounding a smaller circle in the middle. On the right side of the screen, we have 5 small circles surrounding a larger circle in the middle. But you know what? I'll bet you guessed it. Both inner circles are identical in size. And if you don't believe me, just take a look. There's the 2 inner circles. That's the one, and there's the other. They're exactly the same size. So these last 5 screens, let me just put the circles back. These last 5 screens that we looked at really bring home the issue of context and the context that information is presented in and how that affects our common visual sense. How what we think we see is not reality. You know, what implications this have for us in the real world? I mean, just eyewitnesses are notoriously known for being unreliable. They see things, but they see things within a context. And so the context can then shape how they view what they've actually seen. Take policemen that are out on patrol or something. They may see an incident and they may overreact based on the context. Okay, so context is really important. It really influences how we interpret reality. Let's take a look at some other things that influence how we interpret reality. The brain is a really interesting organ. And one of the most interesting things about it is that it does not like partial information. It's very intolerant. If it is presented with incomplete information, it will do its best to complete the information in a way that may make sense, but not necessarily real or what actually is reality. And take this example. We see 3 hands and they appear to be holding a white triangle. But the reality is there is no triangle. There is no triangle there. However, your brain and my brain fills in the blank for us to get rid of the ambiguity. So we think we see a triangle, but there is no triangle there. Here's another example of the brain trying to make sense out of incomplete data. There are 3, they look like Pac-Man symbols, if you recall the old Pac-Man game. And the way they're set up, we swear we see a triangle, but there is no triangle there. There is no triangle. It is the brain filling in the gap to make sense out of information that makes no sense to the brain. So again, the brain can actually trick itself and to trick us into what is real and what is not real. What do you see here? Do you see one face looking straight at you with sort of a mask that comes down over the forehead, down to the lips? Or do you see 2 faces facing each other? It's an interesting phenomenon. Again, this is the brain filling in gaps. By the way, have you ever seen, like, say, a fan blade spinning? And when you look at the blade, it seems to be spinning one way. And when you look at it again, it seems to be spinning the other way or in the opposite direction. This image is pretty similar to that kind of a situation. The brain calculates the probability of a fan blade spinning to the right, and that's 50%, and the probability of the fan blade spinning to the left is 50%. So since both are equal in probability in terms of how the brain is interpreting it, it just switches back and forth. So it'll present it looking one way and it'll present it looking the other way. Which is the real way that the fan is spinning? That becomes the question. This image is similar. The probability of seeing one face looking directly at you or 2 faces looking at each other, it's identical. It's 50%, 50-50. So the brain will switch back and forth, and your mind may switch back and forth as you're looking at this. It makes sense when you understand the process, but not very good common sense. I want you to take a minute and read this statement to yourselves. Okay, so You could write a whole sentence with each word misspelled just as long as the first and last letter remain the same. The human brain can still determine what is being written. That's amazing. It is amazing. There are 34 words that appear on the screen. 11 of them, or 34%, are spelled correctly, while 23, or 66%, are misspelled. Yet you had no problem reading and understanding the sentence. So your remarkable brain filled in all of the gaps for you to make sense out of this. Well, okay, the last few slides give us an indication of how the brain can be tricked into filling in missing information and therefore giving us invalid information. Prior to that, we had context can distort information that we have coming in. Here is an example of perspective shaping what we perceive as reality. Obviously, the bowling ball closest to the man's hand is bigger than the bowling ball closest to the bowling pins. Makes common sense. Or does it? Let's take a look. Okay, there are circles around both bowling balls. That's the first one. It's the second one. The bowling balls are exactly the same in size. The perspective that the information is presented in distorts what we view as real and what we view as not real. Again, reality, very elusive concept. Expectations can be another way to distort what we see as real or what we perceive as reality. Our expectation is that Santa Claus is heavier than the elf, and therefore the seesaw seems to be tilted in the favor of Santa Claus. Santa Claus seems to be bringing it down a little bit. And is this real or not? Let's take a look. Well, there's a line that's measuring. It goes straight across. That's a straight line there. Again, in this case, it's our expectations as to what is real that distorts the actual reality. So our own expectations can shape what is real. But consider all the expectations you and I have and how some of these might affect what we determine to be real. That's a scary thought. Here's an interesting, this is one of my favorite ones. What do you see here? If you are like most adults, you see a naked man and woman in sort of a romantic embrace. However, if you are around 6 years of age or younger, you don't see that. You see 10 dolphins. Take a look. Young children don't have the sexual experience or schema or frame of reference that we do. So they see what is their reality, the dolphins. We see what is our reality, which is a man and woman in an intimate embrace. So developmental age is another issue that can affect our perception of reality. Oh, this is really interesting effect. I'm going to play the video clip several times. It's only about 20 seconds or so. The first time I play it, only look at the person on the left side of the screen and determine if that person is saying the word bar or the word far. Okay, I'm going to turn it on. So just look at the person on the left side of the screen. Determine whether he's saying bar or far. Bar, 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 bar. Okay, that person was saying bar. if you're looking on the left. Now, I'm going to play it again, and this time look at the person on the right side of the screen and determine if he is saying bar or far. So we're looking at the right now.
Bar, 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 bar.
Now that person on the right was saying the word far. Now I'm going to play it again, and this time look at both images or go back and forth and tell me or figure out what you're hearing.
Bar, 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 bar.
Well, what happened? What's going on here? It appears if we look at the image on the left, the person is saying bar, and if we look at the image on the right, the person is saying far. That's a very weird thing, very weird thing. How do we interpret what's real there? This is the electromagnetic spectrum of light, all of light. I believe it's a fair statement to say that for most mammals, the most important sensory input is the sense of smell. When we sapiens became bipedal, when we stood up and walked on 2 feet, on 2 legs, instead of our 4 legs, our major sensory input became our sight and our hearing. When as a species we stood up and walked, our noses were rather far away from the ground, so we evolved to rely on sight and sound and not our sense of smell so much like other mammals do. On your screen, you're looking at the electromagnetic spectrum of light waves. On the extreme right, we have gamma rays, and then X-rays, and then ultraviolet light, visible light, infrared light rays, microwaves, and finally, on the extreme left, radio waves. Notice the area of visible light. That's the light you and I can see. It is only a tiny, tiny fraction of all the light that exists in the universe. We can just see a tiny, tiny fraction. There are animals that can see and navigate via infrared or ultraviolet light. We humans are almost literally blind in the universe when it comes to the entire spectrum of total light and what can be seen. We only see a very tiny bit. There's much more going on in the universe than we are totally unable to perceive or see it. On your screen here is a graphic depicting the hearing ranges of various species. There are humans, dogs, dolphins, fish. You can see the graphic. Typically, our human range of hearing is between 20 hertz, which are cycles per second, at the low end, to 35,000 hertz, or cycles per second, at the high end. You can see that dogs, dolphins, fish, bats, rodents all hear sounds we are unable to hear. And this is just a sprinkling of various species. The universe is full of sound that we are totally, totally unaware of. We have no idea. We not only are almost blind in the universe, but we are almost deaf in the universe also. So, this video addresses epistemology, or what is real. And I think we're finding out that reality is a very elusive concept. As we have seen, our view of reality, or what is real, can be distorted by the context that information comes in. It can be distorted because our brains have a need to fill in blanks and ambiguity, so it fills it in with information which may be real or not. Our view of reality can be distorted by the perspective that information is presented in. It can be distorted by our own expectations, what we're expecting to happen. Or it can be distorted by developmental readiness, and of course our limited sight in terms of things that exist in the universe and our limited ability to hear. So we're left with, how does one know what is real, what is truth, what is fact? And so finally, I think we're going to get to the basis of the course. And as I had mentioned, epistemology is the branch of science concerned with the nature and scope of knowledge, and it's the theory of knowledge. And we're interested in what is knowledge and how can it be acquired? What is the extent to which any subject or entity can be known? What is real and what is not real? And how do we know this? And what is our evidence level? So I'd like to make the distinction here between science and pseudoscience. Science, as you can see on the left-hand part of it, is systematic observation about the world that leads to beliefs and theories about reality. So science uses systematic observations about the world, and that leads us to draw theories and belief systems about what is real. On the other hand, pseudoscience consists of one person or one group's beliefs or opinions about the world, and these opinions and beliefs lead to beliefs and theories about reality. So science is based on a systematic observation of phenomenon in the world and then drawing conclusions about beliefs and theories, whereas pseudoscience are individual or group opinions or beliefs about what goes on in the world, and then they create beliefs and theories about that. Obviously, pseudoscience can lead us to a lot of difficult and distorted information. Most of the traditional sources of knowing tend to be unreliable. So we looked at tradition and reliance on authority and logic and non-consensus reality and faith and common sense. Even our senses, we can't rely on them. They don't give us valid and reliable information. So in this course, we're asking you to make an assumption. We're asking you to make an assumption that the scientific method, which is a systematic examination of phenomenon using verifiable procedures, and which is subject to peer review, is the best thing we have going for us right now in terms of determining what is real, what is truth, what is actual fact. Now, we're asking you to have this assumption for this course. You may not like the assumption, but you don't have to have it for your life. But that's what this course is about. That the scientific method, the systematic examination of phenomenon, using verifiable procedures that everyone can be aware of, and that is peer-reviewed, that it's shared so that it can be critiqued, that is the most reliable and valid way of gaining what is real, what is reality, or what is truth. Now, there are assumptions to the scientific method. And they are: the world is real, it's material, and it's knowable, that it can be measured. So that's an assumption of the scientific method. Second one is events in the world have identifiable causes and effects. Another assumption: everyday experience and logical analysis are not good enough to give us valid and reliable information about reality or truth. And then the last one is that the scientific inquiry, the systematic experimentation, is the most reliable and valid way of gaining information about the world and reality. Okay, that's the video. Here's your assignment. Please create a Word document and respond in writing to the following. Number one, your self-assessment information, which you did at the beginning of the video, about what you knew for sure about teaching and what your evidence was, or how you came to know those things. Please put that in your Word document. Put in the things that you knew and what your evidence was. Number two, I'd like you to thoughtfully write a reaction to the quote which is below here. And the quote is, "We form our beliefs for a variety of subjective, personal, emotional, and psychological reasons in the context of environments created by family, friends, colleagues, culture, and society at large. After forming our beliefs, we then defend, justify, and rationalize them with a host of intellectual reasons, cogent arguments, and rational explanations. Beliefs come first, explanations follow. I call this process belief-dependent realism, where our perceptions about reality are dependent on the beliefs that we hold about it. Reality exists independent of human minds, but our understanding of it depends upon the beliefs we hold at any given time." And this is the citation. So I'd like you to thoughtfully respond in writing thoughtfully about that quote. And number three, your thoughtful written responses to this video and its contents. Now, I want you to put all that information in one Word document and name the document your name _ in epistemology, and then please email your document to me at happyj1939@yahoo.com. Well, thank you very much for the video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we will see you in the next video.